Okay, got a notification that says it's recording?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, everyone, welcome to. Okay, perfect. Well, everyone, welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And so honored with the guests that we have on. We have back on the program Troy Moten, who's a contributor to Your World News, where journalism and activism are not mutually exclusive. He's also he's also an activist in the racial justice movement in the U.S. And when he's not doing that, he's also a businessman and helps out other people to develop their business. And I'll make sure to put the links to that at the end of the interview. So, Troy, first of all, thanks for coming back on the program, especially under such short notice.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's an honor to have you. And now, Troy, normally I write down my questions, but I didn't do it this time because I think we're because well, yeah. Anyways, I didn't do it this time, but I do have the topics that I want to discuss with you about. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about is there's an issue amongst dare I say the white left, the our white socialist brothers and sisters and our white Marxists and our who have who all to a degree who many of them to a degree have imperial blind spots and racist blind spots, if you know what I mean. And even immigrant communities that come to the U.S. and are poorly mistreated by the white dominated capitalist system. A lot of them, bizarrely enough, also engage in anti-black racism or anti-indigenous racism and and so forth. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about, this gets into the stupid hostility towards critical race theory, is can you talk to us about why you reject the whole identity politics versus the class struggle, and talk to us about how some of those people who do complain about identity politics, too much political correctness, on the left, so. Talk to us about that because there is an issue of class reductionism, and I have my criticism towards Black Lives Matter and to some of the Black civil rights movement of being too much racial reductionist. But talk to us about why you reject this whole really toxic debate that's developing of the whole identity politics versus the class struggle.
Yeah, well, I spend a lot of my time on the Black Power movement, on the eradication, the elimination of white supremacy, which is a threat to the globe. Number one, I would say the number one threat, definitely in the United States. White supremacy is the law of the land, but white supremacy is definitely a global phenomenon that reaches every part of the world, of the globe. So, I definitely fight it wherever it shows its face, no matter what political party you subscribe to, what side of the political spectrum you say you align with, because white supremacy is all over that spectrum, from the leftist of the left to the rightist of the right. And I can find a white supremacist anarchist, I can find a white supremacist communist, a white supremacist libertarian, a Republican, a Democrat, and so on. So I don't really get caught up too much in the labels I see. Are you fighting against white supremacy? Do you want to see its end, or are you defending it? Are you advocating for it? Are you full throated behind it? Some people talk about they want justice and equality, but when it comes to sacrificing their unearned white privilege, then they have, not much to say. Then mum's the word, and they want to change the subject. And I'm not a big fan of changing the subject, because that means more harm, more abuse, and more death to my people. So that's not going to work when people try to change the subject to class or socioeconomic status or play these political gang warfare games where they want to, hyper blame the Republicans even though the Democrats are no better, or vice versa. So that's what really matters, getting rid of the white supremacy wherever it may lie.
One quick follow-up before I get to the second question of mine then is I remember when I first had you on the program, and I'll be honest, I didn't agree with all of your assessments on different things, but you said something which I thought about nonstop after the conversation, and it was a conversation I also touched on with Margaret Kimberly about some of our white socialist, white Marxist friends or comrades or who engage in that sort of class reductionism. And Margaret was saying that those should be red flags for me if when you hear some of these white Marxists who are engaging in class reductionism. They only want to talk about the working class, when it's like, okay, well, you basically only want to talk about the white working class. Just be honest. You basically only want to talk about the white working class, and you're just annoyed because we're saying Black Lives Matter, and you're annoyed when some of us lionize Malcolm X, and then you want to always finger wag about how the Haitian Revolution wasn't so good and the Cuban Revolution wasn't so good, and then always talking about like Trotsky this and like the Russian revolutions and stuff like that, or the French Revolution, and it's like, okay, all right, like do you know what I mean by that? And I remember when you were talking about I disagree that I think that both the Black Lives Matter movement should be merging with the Native Lives Matter movement, but I'll get into that later. But I like but you were saying that that one of the reasons why you're so involved with primarily with the Black power struggle in the tradition of a Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., Black Panther parties, and so forth, is because you've actually witnessed times where you organize a rally for police brutality against Black people, or all the different issues that affect Black people, institutional racism, and there's always the occasional white ally or somebody from somebody from another group that engages in their form of, why not all lives matter? Why not talk about the class struggle? And so can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah. White supremacy is ingrained in the mind from birth. They got the 1947 doll test that was had 3 to 7 year old Black children and pick out which doll they liked, and they picked out the white doll. And they said positive things about the white doll and said ugly, nasty things about the Black doll, and which showed just how racism is internalized and taught and socialized and programmed to us from a young age, from the start. So you add that to the white supremacist school system and the miseducation that we get through the school system and then through the media. So just the disrespect that comes against black people is all throughout society. And so when you have all these different social justice issues, some people, some white people, some Latin people, some Asian people, they can't shake the white supremacy ingrained in them, whether they got it from their family or maybe they come from another country, and the media is that they see over there is just as anti-Black sometimes, if not worse. So they bring that over to the United States, and of course, if you're born here, you've seen that type of anti-Black media since day one. If you're watching mainstream news, which is definitely something one should not do. Mainstream news is corporate media is the most destructive force in the land. I mean, millions of people are dumber because of it. They're sicker, they're poorer, because they're being lied to on a daily basis, because they're being, spoon-fed this daily dose of colonialist talk and imperialist talk and white supremacist talk and this pro-uber capitalist talk where they have you voting against your interests and taking, the pharmaceutical industry is running rampant and got you drugging yourself when you just should change your lifestyle to and eat properly and exercise. So yeah, when you see these different races and ethnicities try to broach Black issues, sometimes they're real hesitant. Sometimes they're real just cautious in their word, and because at the end of the day, they know they're not experiencing a lot of the pain that Black people are experiencing. The police terrorism is 80, 85%, 90%. When you talk about the stop and frisk of Black and Latin, mostly Black people, that and 90% of the people that stopped and frisked are unarmed. You talk about the Jim Crow, the new Jim Crow, which is the mass incarceration epidemic, if you will. That's mostly an attack on Black people. So when you got white people and you want to talk about that stuff, they feel very, very uneasy, and not something that affects them as much, so they don't really care. Sometimes they try to put up a front that they care, but it's really not something that they're really all that passionate about, because it doesn't affect them. And sometimes they feel that Black people deserve it. You got some of them talk about, what did you do? What did you say to the police? Maybe you deserve that beat down. Maybe you should have just complied. You got people say, so-called good intention people that say stuff like that all the time and don't know how crazy they sound. And you name the issue, and it's just if you name reparations, if you talk about reparations, they start saying stuff like, I didn't have any slaves, and they act like they have no idea of the white unearned privilege that they have, and all the different benefits that they receive just because of their skin color. So there's just a lot of we go down the issue from war and all the different just all the different ways Black people are attacked, and they're just real hesitant and real reticent to really put their full-fledged efforts behind it, because just doesn't interest them as much.
That's a perfect segue to reparations. Now, I want you to make the case, make the case why the Black community and our non-Black allies, our white socialist Marxist comrades and so forth, either at home or internationally, why they should be supporting reparations for the Black Holocaust in the U.S., slavery, the new Jim Crows, that loophole in the 13th Amendment. Why? So make the case why our community, whether it's in the U.S. And the entire community, so like our non-Black communities, why they should be supporting that element in the racial justice movement, which is reparations for Black people because of slavery and all of the other white supremacist policies that our people have faced.
Yeah, reparations is about getting money owed to us. It's not about handouts. It's about getting repaid for unpaid labor from slavery, from convict leasing, from the Black codes, from the constant attack that never stopped from 1619 or 1555 or whichever year you want to really start from, when Black people were enslaved, abused, and the country was built off the backs of Black people. They enslaved our ancestors, and we made all these inventions that they took credit for. So you're talking about not only unpaid labor, but unpaid compensation for a lot of the inventions that they took credit for. They patented it, and use to build the country and create all these different corporations that end up making billions of dollars, not only off of our labor, but our ideas. So you're talking about compensation for abuse and undue, wrongful death, and you just name the centuries of different abuses, and it's about being compensated correctly. So if you're about justice and equality, then you should be for people getting their just due, and people getting their families get back together. Obviously, the wealth gap comes from somewhere. The reason that Black people are behind in all these different socioeconomic factors and these conditions of quality of life is because of the systematic attack, the institutional racism that's been ingrained in every facet of society, from law to economics to education to the court system to the media. When someone is wronged, they're supposed to get compensated, and we've been wronged in every single way, every single form. So when people talk about, you're making me, if somebody says, somebody white says, I wasn't there, I didn't do anything to you, but they don't understand, or they refuse to understand, they act like they don't understand that they're receiving generational benefits off of the work that my ancestors did, our ancestors did. So they're receiving they got ahead from our work.
That plus the dispossession of Native Americans and Native Hawaiians and Native Alaskans, and of course, Puerto Rico and all of the different, they call them territories, I call them colonies, that the United States still engages in. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the Native Americans got some form of reparations, not probably sufficient, but they got their land set aside. They got casinos. They have certain deals with the United States. They give them certain sovereignty, certain sovereign control over certain of the tribal lands. So Native Americans got some reparations. Shouldn't Black people? If Japanese Americans got reparations from when they were in internment camps around the Pearl Harbor days, when they were mistreated for the few years, they got compensation in the millions. So and Japanese Americans got compensated, recompensed, repaired for, and they was just abused and interned for just a relatively short time, of course, and nowhere near the 400 plus years that Black Americans have been abused and wrongfully killed and all that and abused. So obviously, and then you talk about the Jewish population. The Jewish Americans are still receiving reparations from something that didn't even happen on this land. They're receiving reparation from the Holocaust, which happened in Europe. So if American Jews are getting paid for something that happened in another land, then it'd be outrageous for you to argue that there's no way that the United States can pay for an injustice that happened on this land. So you just talk about fairness, you talk about justice, you talk about what is right, what would make things more on a level playing ground, close the wealth gap, and so on. Then you would talk about giving proper money, whether that's checks to every Black American that can trace their lineage back to an American descendant of slave, a descendant of an American slave, which you can do that by looking at past census reports, and that's really not all that hard to trace one of your parents back or one of your ancestors back to a descendant of an American slave. So there is, some people argue we want land and don't want checks, but then I say, we're running in a capitalist society where money is how you get things. So, and if everybody else that got reparations got it in the form of a check, then money, then we should too. When you start talking about, land or education or degrees, well, that stuff is not as readily counted and They can play games like give us, poor quality land, or if you have no money to develop the land, then what's the use? Um, and if some people talk about, we'll give you free college. Well, if you have free college and you got a bunch of degrees, but no businesses in which to execute your degrees, because we still live in a white supremacist society, so you got a bunch of educated black people who can't get jobs because they got to go to racist companies to try to get the jobs, then obviously that's not going to work. And we know that, through books like Powernomics by Dr. Claude Anderson, that the power comes from the businesses. The power comes from the investment in land, and that's how you really collect, power and grow your societies and grow your communities, by building your own businesses and supermarkets and hospitals, and then your media outlets and your own schools and your own police force and things of that nature. Build your own institutions. That's how we can get repaired. That's how we can get back on the page that we need to be, so we can be a thriving nation.
A quick follow-up then on reparations. Now, how can I how can I approach this? Now, I in general, actually, okay, so yeah, two quick follow-ups on reparations. What do you say to people within the black and of course we're talking about the U.S. So not about other countries, but when you what do you say to those in the black community that don't want to get on the reparations movement, or somebody like myself? And I know I sound North American, but I'm actually not from North America. I'm a Congolese Dutch person. I'm a North American trapped in the Congolese Dutch body, and I'm trapped in Belgium. But so what do you say to those in the black community who are not on board with reparations, or somebody like myself, who, and our white socialist comrades, our white Marxists and the white liberals, who say that no, we don't need reparations. All we need is the Voting Rights Act, all of the different civil rights legislations that Martin Luther King Jr. was part of, a housing bill, a black GI economics bill, and we just have to get rid of the loophole in the 13th Amendment, end the drug wars, and I am definitely in favor of ending the drug wars, and I'm very socially liberal when it comes to people consuming, pot and whatnot. So, what do you say to people who say that that's what we need? That's what we need for the black community, as well as community control over the police, and some people would even say abolition of the police, like my like my past guest Al Jones. So what do you say to people who say that's what we should be champion, not reparations, because the society is already so racist towards us that it's only going to inflame those Confederate flag waving assholes and so forth, and that it's a counterproductive approach to racial justice, if you know what I mean.
Well, white supremacists are going to be white supremacists. They're going to hate black people either way. So caring about their feelings is not on my priority list. It's not on my list at all. It is about justice. That's what the goal is. Not about appeasing the people that are all for white supremacy. If it was up to them, they want to see black people continue at the bottom. So to care about their desires is a complete antithesis to any form of justice. But it's not about ending police brutality or reparations. It's not either or. It's both. And you do all the above. You end the war on drugs. You end the war on poverty. You end the police terrorism. You end the miseducation of the the Negro, as the good book Carter G. Woodson titles his book. I was just reading that book just the other day, and that book written decades ago is just as relevant as ever, talking about how black people are mistaught about our history, and and we learned a whitewashed version of history, which highlights and cheers on white people and degrades and dismisses and ignores black people and all the inventions. And then these educated Negroes come out and they sound white. You talk about a black face, and then some of them sound just as confused as ever because of the whitewash education. Right now you talk about the school system and how they're trying or not trying. They've already eliminated slavery out of the textbooks, calling it involuntary immigration, or they came over here to look for work. All sorts of nonsense.
Or they'll say things like, well, they'll also say two things, and even though I had fantastic teachers in my second and third grade who taught me to the best that they were allowed to, the plight of Native Americans, the plight of black people, and so forth. But the version of history was that they still fell into the the civil right, the Civil War, the American Civil War was about state rights, and then comes the slavery thing, and they'll say and of course you're taught throughout so much of even the best left-leaning outlets that Abraham Lincoln was a white knight in shining armor, and he was a good friend to black people, completely leaving out the fact that the guy stole land from the Mexican nation, continued to oppress indigenous people. So he definitely wasn't a friend to Native Americans. And of course, the guy wanted to actually, if he like, it was the abolitionist movement that pushed Abraham Lincoln to be, better on anti-slavery and to confront, the South that wanted to continue child slavery. But he wasn't this. But he and the founding fathers, none of them were friends to black people, and of course, it's like the South are the bad apples, but the North are the good apples, and Alexander Hamilton and all of and the founding fathers, who Glenn Ford once called those miserable sons of a bitches. I mean, they were all white supremacists, and even among some of the best anti-imperialist educators, they all have these kind of racist imperial blind spots when it comes to, don't tear down statues of the founding fathers, don't tear down statues of Abraham Lincoln, and we only need to ban the Confederate flag, but why do you guys want to replace the American flag with some new flag, and so forth and so forth.
Yeah, and you talked about the Voting Rights Act. I mean, that's that. Voting is often what a lot of people go to because they know it's not the real answer. It's a real deflection. In a thoroughly corrupt country like the United States, with the electoral voting system being corrupted by the billion-dollar industries like the pharmaceutical industry and the oil and the gas industry, and politicians are thoroughly held. They're captured by the donor and the donor class and the wealthy and the elite.
Gerrymandering,
Yep, just to name a few. And then so you talk about how third parties, how the Democrats and Republicans got the United States on lock, so that no third, fourth, fifth alternative parties can come to the light, because they know they want the donor class to control this country. And if you have any other parties trying to actually represent the interests of the people, that's not going. Well, that's not going to go over and mess up their money. So so the voting is not the answer, or we'll say like this. I still vote and see that it can benefit more particularly on the local level. But if you continue to vote for one of the corrupt main parties, the Democrats and Republicans, you're not looking to help. You're not looking to help, especially black people, because those parties are white supremacists to the core and corrupt to the core. So if someone's talking about voting, if they're not really talking about making a public system that gets money out of politics, then you're really not talking about having a system that's going to actually represent the people. If you're talking about a system that continues to arrest third-party candidates when they try to participate in the debates, like they did with Jill Stein back in the when she ran for president on the Green Party ticket, then that's not going to be a true a representation of the people, because you're keeping out key voices that talk about what the people actually want, which the Democrats and Republicans are totally opposed to. We had people talk about the Bernie Sanders, and they thought that was going to be their chance at being actually represented, and then they saw how he backed off when the heat was on, and then he ended up championing Hillary Clinton, who was just the opposite of what all his supporters wanted. So showed his lack of integrity, his lack of character, and he was actually given a chance to be at the head of the Green Party, and leave the corrupt parties. But he was beholden to that. So voting, that's just it's a tool, but that's a real.
So then Troy, so then going back then to the whole to I think the stupid identity politics versus class struggle debate, which is tearing apart the left, and what you advocate, you champion reparations on top of all of the other very good social justice issues that I mentioned. So how would you so for you, reparations, because I often say, when I talk to people about the whole identity versus the class struggle, I often ask those who lean more on the class struggle side, like, why can't we chew gum and walk at the same time? I understand the importance of dismantling institutional classism, capitalism, and I understand that capitalism and imperialism is the greatest evil, which should unite us all. I believe in solidarity, all of that stuff. So why can't we just chew gum and walk at the same time? Why are we pigeonholing ourselves into identity politics versus the class struggle, queer liberation, or the class struggle, or indigenous rights versus the class struggle? I often ask, why can't we chew gum and walk at the same time? And from your point of view, when you were saying why we should be supporting reparations for descendants of slavery and in general, just the black in general the black community, for you, that's chewing gum and walking at the same time, right?
Right. Yeah, definitely got to. It's a big problem, and that requires a revolutionary solution. So when people talk about these band-aid solutions, you're not trying to solve the whole problem. You're trying to solve a 400+ year problem with a 4-year solution. That's not going to work. We're behind in every category and facet of society, and not to the fault of black people, not the fault of black people. That is the fault of the system. The system has been very good at being anti-black and making it part of its laws, which is what critical race theory is all about, and the thing that's made the popular rounds. How critical race theory was a theory developed in the 70s, talking about how racism has been ingrained in the laws of the land, and has been ingrained and made a part of the law of the United States, the systems, the institutions, whether it's the legal systems, the court systems, the education systems, the media systems, and there's a reason why this gap exists. And when right now you see all over the news when people are trying to explain that to people and trying to overturn a lot of this institutional racism, a lot of white people are like, no, we not only do we not want to overturn it, we don't even want to talk about it. We don't want to talk to our children. We don't want, and they're trying to conflate it with Black history in total. So they don't even want Black history told, the truth told, the actual reality of what happened in America. If it has to do with, talking about the contributions of Black people, they don't want it. If they are trying to teach about the realities of the evil that happened, and regarding white supremacy, all these white parents are like, no, We don't want our children to know about what our, mothers and fathers and grandmothers actually did to these people. We want to protect the frail egos of the parents and the frail and the minds of the children, because they don't want to teach the truth. So they rather continue the lies and perpetuate the injustice that comes from the lies. So you see, people talk about, once the old white people die, the young white people will take us to a better place. Well, obviously not. If they're taught the same things, if they want to continue to keep the same miseducation around, which is going to continue the same, injustice and misjustice and all facets, and they want to continue their lock on the education system and continue their lock on the media systems, which just continue to let white supremacy reign and reign completely. So, that's why there's a lot of talk about. I talk a lot about separation, and creating our own institutions, because Malcolm X talked about don't let your it's a foolish thing to let the enemy teach your children. He talked about that in the 1960s, and yet still people are all confused when their black children come home hating themselves or not wanting to deal with black people, and always wanting to downgrade black businesses and down talk black media outlets, and uphold the white things, because that's what they learned in school. They learned that white is right, white is might, the white ice is colder. So until we get rid of that, wash our brains out from that type of toxic thinking, then all this stuff is going to continue. And I don't know if I fully answered your question earlier about the black people not descendants of slaves and how they feel about reparations. Well, that's what reparations is for. It is to repair the injustice done to descendants of slaves. So if you're a black person that does come from another country and you cannot draw your lineage back, then no, you do not get reparations, just like white people wouldn't get reparations or any other.
Troy, you still there? Oh, sorry about that, Troy. I'm also having some internet connections. Wait, Troy, you there? Troy, you there?
To rain on.
Oh wait, so Troy, sorry about that. There seemed to be an internet problem. Can you explain your point again from the beginning?
Yeah. I was saying about the non-descendants of slaves, non-descendants of American slaves, that they wouldn't qualify for reparations should we get it, because they can't draw their lineage back. Just because you don't get it don't mean you shouldn't be for it. You should be for justice, whether it involves you or not. If you are about human decency and equality and freedom for all, then you should want to see justice. So that handles that. I know some people, they're like, I don't get reparations, so forget it. Right? No, that's not the way to be. You should have justice as a priority concern.
Thanks so much for that, because I was one of those black people that was like, meh, I'm for reparations in principle, but come on, we're not going to convince the white working class that we're owed reparations, and it's only going to make them more into Trump cult followers or or Clinton type of cult followers, and it's going to be counterproductive for our racial justice movement. So thank you so much for how you made the case and presenting that to me, because I think I'll no longer be on the fence about not getting behind reparations for black people in general, but of course those descendants of the African slavery, the Holocaust. So thank you so much for that. That's why we have people like you and Margaret, Kimberly, and Solomon on the show. So that's a perfect segue then into Actually, wait, but one last thing about reparations before we talk about the issues that you brought up about critical race theory and the hostility to critical race theory, which is so absolutely ridiculous. And this goes into the problem with the white Marxists and white socialists who claim that they are anti-racist. So one of the reasons why I also wasn't on board with reparations is because the guy who became a rock star making the case for reparations was what's his name? Oh my gosh, I'm completely blanking on his name, but he wrote an article for the Atlantic. Do you I think Ta-Nehisi Coates. Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Yep.
Okay. So the reason why I wasn't on board with reparations is because Ta-Nehisi Coates, when he became, you know, a bit of a rock star advocating for reparations, he was on the Stephen Colbert show back when Colbert did the Colbert Report. And, Colbert was playing, you know, this right-wing Fox News type of talking head. And when Colbert says, well, what about Native Americans? What about American Indians? Shouldn't they get reparations? And Ta-Nehisi Coates said the following, possibly. Really? And then that's when I was like, okay, nah, sorry, I can't get behind Ta-Nehisi Coates and everybody who keeps retweeting and talking about reparations for Black people but wants to continue to throw Native Americans under the bus. That's my red flag. I don't want to get involved in the movement like that. And of course, Ta-Nehisi Coates went on to sort of, if there is a the problem with also something like Ta-Nehisi Coates is he does regaze in racial reductionism and separates, you know, the Black class struggle issue with that. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I did mention that earlier that Native Americans have some form of reparations already, so that's one point. The other point is, you know, it's okay as Black people to fight for Black people. There is. Some Black people just feel like we have to fight all causes, fight for all groups at all times. And even though very few groups fight for us. And so that unequal, unreciprocated energy is just something that's been holding us back for a very long time.
Goes back to what you were saying about how you have like Latino immigrants who engage in anti-Black racism, or white European immigrants across the entire continent who are horribly mistreated by the xenophobes, but then they bizarrely engage in anti-Black racism and why not all lives matter and
yeah. And then, of course, there's some people that say Native Americans played a large portion in the race in the slavery as well. There's plenty of Native American linkages to holding slaves and trading slaves as well. So there's that conflict in addition to Native Americans holding anti-Black views to this day. So, they're affected by white supremacy as well. So that's why you may not get the full-throated endorsement when it comes to Native Americans reparations. But, I say they've been all types of mistreated and abused and need further compensation outside of their casinos and little bits of land. But yeah, it's really when you talk about the 400 years of continued injustice against Black people, it's just when people are not fighting for our long ask for justice, then it doesn't leave me much time and effort to fight for other groups. So they'll have to look elsewhere for their fight.
Ta-Nehisi Coates, but you do agree with some of the criticisms that our friends at Black Agenda Reports have said about him, though, right?
Well, I'm not sure exactly which concerns you're talking about.
Well, you know what? I'll leave that aside. We'll return to that in another episode. I think that's probably the well. Anywho, I don't like Ta-Nehisi Coates. I still believe in chewing. I still believe in chewing gums and vodka at the same time. But don't worry, Troy. You did convert me into being a champion for reparations. So.
Oh, very good, very, very good.
Okay, so let's talk about so talking again about what you were saying. You know, those in other colored communities and white communities, and those who claim that they're left leaning and all of that stuff, and revolutionary Marxists and so forth, who engage in anti-black racism or just have these racist blind spots, these imperialist blind spots. Critical race theory. Talk about how because I've also seen I've also noticed that people that you think are anti-racism and are anti-imperialism and so forth, going like, oh, critical race theory, this is again identity politics gone madness, or this is political correctness gone madness. We don't need to learn about critical race theory and so forth. We're already taught enough about racism towards black people, and talk about that.
Well, yeah, they're just being exposed, and it's good to have these people exposed. During Obama's presidency, you had people exposed, and the racists came out of the closet when they saw a black face in high place. Even though he did so many anti-black things, it wasn't even funny. But just because he was superficially, symbolically black, a bunch of racists came out of the woodwork. And then, of course, when Trump got elected, then he seemed to embolden people and give them new courage to come on out and be loud and proud with their white supremacy. But now we got Joe Big Biden in there, and he is no friend of black people either. So really, no matter who the president is, racism is alive and well. Anti-black racism is alive and well in the United States of America, through the rhetoric and through the votes and the laws and the policies that we push, or that they push. And critical race theory is just the buzzword or the term that's made the rounds for some reason. It's really a term I just heard within the past year, even though, like I said before, it was a term that's created in the 1970s. For some reason, this term has been popularized and picked up, and now people talking about it and don't even know what it is. I talked about earlier how it's about how racism has been embedded in the laws of the land and in the institutions. But when you turn on the TV, they're not talking about that. They're talking about how they think critical race theory is teaching black history or teaching about racism in any form. And they think if you're telling your children about racism and white supremacy, that you are talking about critical race theory, and it's a bad thing. It's not technically critical race theory, every form of racism, but whether you call it critical race theory or you call it good old racism, good old institutional racism, then it's something that should be taught, and it should be taught. We can debate on what age it should be taught at, but like I said with the 3-year-olds earlier with that doll test, how racism is acknowledged by children. So I would argue it's best to talk about it sooner than later. Whether you talk about it on a superficial level, just having black pride and having and knowing about the inventors and some of the prominent black people that were instrumental to American history. Maybe not until later, middle school, high school, college, you can talk about the intricacies of the Jim Crow laws and the convict leasing and the mandatory minimums and that stuff. We can, there's levels to this. So obviously, we can talk about racism and the systematic piece of it in different ways. But yeah, and you turn on TV and it's like, now they're talking about in Texas, I believe, and several other states, they talk about you cannot talk negatively about the Ku Klux Klan. You cannot say the KKK was an evil organization or a bad organization. You have to either excuse me, you have to either talk about it from a neutral stance where you can't say there's bad or good, or you can't talk about them at all. this is not progress. This is not white people showing that they've learned anything or that they want to move forward. They want to have any sense of equality or justice. Talking about you can't talk about
it's funny. I have a friend of mine. Well, I have two friends of mine who live in Arizona. One is a retired teacher, and I remember when there was all of the hostility in high schools and in colleges in Arizona to remove Latino studies or Chicano studies, and well, that again is white supremacy. It's people who don't want to know about how how a quarter of the U.S. was stolen from Mexico, and and the dispossession of the indigenous Mexicans and Central Americans and those who were and the mestizos, those who are mixed race, and the reason why we do have a Latin American studies or Latino studies or Mexican American studies or Chicano studies, even African American studies, even gender studies, even queer studies. The reason why we do have all of that in universities is we're trying to tell a new way of teaching history and trying to break from the patriarchal narrative or the white supremacist narrative or the heteronormative narrative or just the ridiculous American exceptionalism narrative. If we don't have African, again, I'm all for solidarity, and I'm all for us uniting all of us oppressed class, all of the oppressed classes of different races and sexual orientations uniting to abolish capitalism and all of the different evils, whether it's patriarchy, anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, and so forth. But if we can't even air the dirty laundries of the founding fathers or of Abraham Lincoln, and we're not being taught that that California was that was stolen from Mexico, or that New Mexico and Arizona was stolen by the Mexican population, and if we can't even have those kinds of conversations where we have Black professors or indigenous professors or females giving just teaching the real history of just the real history and just what people weren't taught in middle schools and high schools because there wasn't enough time to get to that, and to see people being hostile towards critical race theory or to even all of the other studies. It's like, okay, well, when is it okay for us to tell our own stories and for us to call out racism? Like, when can we do that? Because it seems as if every time we want to talk about institutional racism, whether it's the police brutality, there's always just these people who find these new ways of wanting to change the subject and going, oh, I'm tired of talking about racism. Come on, guys, the class struggle. We all need to unite. The class struggle. And it's like, anyways, it just annoys me to no end, and that's where I start having some red flags, and again, and it just goes to show you that some of our comrades do have racist blind spots or have this American exceptionalism thing, which is why they're so hostile towards Gerald Horne's narrative on the on the Revolutionary War. Margaret Kimberly, I won't say the name of the website. But it's a website I do like, and I do read sometimes. But but they were against the tearing down of statues of the founding fathers and Abraham Lincoln and so forth. And I said in the comment section, I respectfully disagree with my comrades on this, and I just mentioned how Margaret Kimberly's new book and even Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. Just how, the founding fathers were, sexists and homophobes and anti-indigenous and anti-Black. I don't know why that's controversial. I don't understand why that's controversial for some Marxists and so forth to accept. And I was just shocked at the hostility I got from people who saying, you're engaging in too much identity politics. Oh, you're reading too much the New York Times with the 1619 Project. And it was like, dude, I don't even read the New York Times. I read Howard Zinn. I read Black Agenda Report, and again, these are not this is not a controversial position. Read anyone who even knows elementary history, like the dispossession, the theft of Turtle Island from Native Americans, Indigenous Canadians, Mexicans. I mean, yeah. Okay, sorry, I went a bit on a rant there, but yeah, when the fact that I got the fact that I received such hostility in that internet comment section, that's when I started to go and that's when I started to think, you know what, I'm kind of tired of this stupid identity politics versus the class struggle thing, and that indeed, I mean, there are many people, our the white working class movements, who, yeah, they're great on socialism and stuff like that, but they do have these, racist blind spots or sexist blind spots and whatnot. So what's your reaction to that story of mine?
I think you're entirely too kind with the term racist blind spots. I think you're ignoring racism is racism, is a hostile act, and anybody who's purposely hostile to you and your people, that's not a blind spot. That's something that's an act of war. That that's maybe the opposite extreme of blind spot. Blind spot is like, I don't know about this issue. Why don't you teach me? Or I don't really recognize this issue. Why don't you enlighten me? These people don't want to be enlightened. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want you to come up. They don't want you to elevate. They don't want you to take their privilege away. They don't want to, you and them to be on the same page. They want to maintain their unearned benefits. So, if you keep on having to say that, no, listen to me about this issue, and they keep on going, no, I don't want to. That's not a blind spot. That is a complete, I don't care. I have no interest in this. Let's stop talking about it. I will continue changing the subject because I do not want to see anything change in this area. I'm not interested, and anybody who's not interested in the elevation or even the survival of my people, that's no friend of mine.
Yeah, it reminds me, you were talking about how lots of people in the Black community in the U.S. Start to engage in self-hatred. Can you talk a bit more about that? Because I have an interesting story to share with you personally about that.
Yeah, unfortunately, Black history is not properly taught in schools, and if your parents don't know, if your parents don't teach you, or because they don't know, because they receive poor education themselves, and if you don't get self-taught, either through the books or through the internet, then you're going to go around talking about, Black people can't do this, or Black people aren't deserving of this, or I need to go work for a white person, or I need to go shop at this white store, or white people are better at this and white people are better at that. That's just a lot of the, you're just repeating a lot of the teachings that you received in school, and that's been, solidified by the media and all aspects of life that tell you that here in America, white is superior and Black is inferior, and yeah, if you're not taught otherwise, then a lot of Black people repeat that nonsense. And unfortunately, some of the biggest white supremacists are Black, meaning that you don't have to have white skin in order to advocate or defend or proliferate white supremacy. You can be just as destructive. And sometimes white supremacy is more effective when it comes from Black people, because some people can identify when a white face or when a white mouth is speaking this vitriol, but when a Black person says it, they're confused and they may take it to be true. That's why you got some of these people that are well known for being coons, Candace Owens, Sheriff Clark on Fox News. What's his name? Peters.
The guy who went on the guy who George Bush appointed on the Supreme Court, who's sleazy, creepy, war profiteering Joe Biden. What the Clarence Thomas.
Yep. And then there's so those are what's known as the popular names that a lot of people go to that because they're aired on Fox News and they usually are reciting the white supremacist talking points that they are usually paid so handsomely to recite and to repeat, and that confuses people. But yeah, like I said, coons and white supremacists, black white supremacists are on both sides of the political spectrum. So if you turn the channel to MSNBC, you'll see your Don Lemon coon. You'll see your I don't really watch these channels.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Oh no. Troy, you still there? Oh no. Troy, you still there? Hold on, folks. I'm Choi, can you hear me? Uh-oh. Bear with us, guys. I'm unable to hear Troy right now. Uh-oh. Oh no. Troy? Hello? Okay, hold on, folks. We're having some technical issues, so I'm going to stop recording and try to call Troy back.